Hello everybody, here we are today doing the Toronto Argonauts season preview. We're going to put out Winnipeg's later tonight. Totally forgot about the BC Calgary game tomorrow. That's why these are getting out so close to the season. Was thinking it started Saturday, joke's on me. But anyway, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me. If not, no big deal. Now let's get into it. So the first talking point here is going to be something that everybody's talking about, and that is whether or not Chad Kelly is ready to be the starter for the Toronto Argonauts. Toronto is a club that's really relied on McLeod Bethel-Thompson to be the quarterback for them, the starting QB, for a while now. And it's gone pretty well, especially the past years. You look at what they've been able to achieve. And while I don't think MBT was ever considered a star in that top caliber for quarterbacks, he was a guy that was going to go out there, he was going to play, he was going to, take some big hits, and he was still going to go and possibly throw the game-winning touchdown. That was the reality of the situation. Chad Kelly is in a spot now, after being the Grey Cup hero, to relieve MBT after he ended up having an injury there in the Grey Cup. Has to shift his focus forward to this season, which is going to be interesting because, again, you don't have that safety net of Bethel-Thompson, and you really have to figure out, how am I going to take a step forward as a player when I don't have somebody right there that could be a very helpful advisor for myself. I don't know. I think that's going to be really a big thing here for him. But I do think another thing that's a little concerning about Chad Kelly is he only has 45 career passing attempts in the regular season up to this point in his career, compared to MB2, who had obviously a lot more. I think it was something like 1,400 in his career. That's a big difference. And you know what you're getting with MBT compared to what you're getting with Chad Kelly. It's a little bit more up in the air. However, he does have a lot of potential here with this offense. You look at guys like Curly Gittins Jr., Tavares Daniels, and that receiving core. That's going to help set them up a little bit. But you look at the two-headed monster that they have in the backfield with AJ Ouellette and then Andrew Harris. That's amazing. Both of these guys are probably starting caliber running backs, or at least guys that could be RB1, RB2, which is something that they are doing in Toronto, which could alleviate the situation for Kelly. You have a great guy in Kelly that's mobile, and then you have two guys that can play pretty physical in Harris and Ouellette. And I think Ouellette is starting to get better with, catching the ball, so that's good there too. But they're just in a good situation where none of these other guys are, green. They're not ready to go out there and do their job. They've been there, they've done that, and they should be able to help out their quarterback. Now, a big thing I will say for Kelly is he's probably got a lot of learning left to do, a lot of growing pains to deal with, and that's okay. That's just something that you're going to see from a quarterback that is getting more and more of a taste of a professional league. The good news for him, though, is he's pretty mobile. So, if he was a guy that was more of a pocket passer and things weren't clicking, you would say, oh, well, I'm a little bit worried. But right now he can use that mobility as kind of a safety net for himself. Get out of the pocket, maybe decide to get a run upfield, maybe decides that if he wants to step up into the pocket and he doesn't like what he sees, he can end up going and running. Maybe there's a gap in the middle of the field. Who knows? But we did see in the Grey Cup too that he was able to run, and that's a big thing for him, and that could probably be a good thing for the Argos if the passing game struggles. But again, they've got a really good running back situation compared to some other teams in the league where it's a little bit more up in the air. So I will say Kelly's in a good spot here compared to had he been thrown out into another team like Edmonton a couple of years ago. But we will see whether or not he's capable of being a CFL starter. The second talking point is going to be whether or not the defense can get better. Toronto's defense was not awful last year by any means, but I do think that they got exposed in some certain ways. But the good thing for them is maybe they did bend a little, but they didn't break. They weren't a team that was going to clamp you down and just allow 10 points to some of the better teams in the league. But a good thing that they were able to do is maybe keep it to where it's about 20 points that the team scored, and they might force a couple turnovers. The offense could score off those turnovers, and then they could be in a spot to win multiple games. In fact, they led the league in interceptions last year. They ended up having 29. The second highest was 19. That's big. And for this defense, that the likelihood of being able to replicate that could be a little difficult. And so if you are in a spot where you're not getting as many turnovers, then you're going to have to figure out how to not allow points. Because if you are bending, like I said, where you allow some yards and things like that, but you're not getting some key red zone turnovers, things like that, that could be an issue for them. The good news is they've got some pieces to work with here that I'm really excited about. Jordan Williams, they obviously traded for him from the BC Lions. So now Corey Mace has a great opportunity to play around with his linebacker core a little bit. Enoch Mwamba, Wynton McManus, Jordan Williams. I'm really excited to see here what happens with this trio, how they want to use them, how they will be, thrown out, what their reps will be, things like that. And with Pro Football Focus ending up doing a kind of a partnership with the CFL, I really am curious to see how good are the guys like Jordan Williams? How good are guys like Henoc Mwamba? Because you look at things, and from the CFL perspective, it's a lot of simple stats, things like, tackles and stuff like that. Now we could see some stuff where we could say, oh, maybe he's better than I thought, or maybe he's not as good as I thought. But for Williams, I'm hopeful for him in this linebacking group. Then they also have Lauren or Malade, and he is a guy that just I cannot talk about enough, where I think he's going to be really special. I finally got his name right, and I believe that I got it right. I've heard 3 different pronunciations. We're going with Marshall Ferguson's pronunciation because the Ferg is always right, and he is just a great broadcaster. But back to Ormalade, he is a player that, came over from Calgary and got a lot of money, to be sure. That's definitely nothing to argue about there, but I do feel like injuries had held him back at points in Calgary. Last year, I feel like I also got to focus on him a little bit more, and every time I watched him, I thought, he is a very good player and a great acquisition for this defensive line for Toronto. They did lose Jagara Davis, but I'm not as concerned about that. Davis is getting a little bit older. We will see there. And then also, I thought I saw somewhere that Jamal Peters had been released by the Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons in the NFL. Of course, he's well known as being the Ticat killer in the Argonauts, or for the Argonauts last year. So if they wanted to try to get him back, that's something that happens. You saw Winston Rose come back from the NFL for the Blue Bombers a couple of years ago. Might have been last year, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that is something that worked out for them. But regardless, I do think with the offense probably taking its time, trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen here with Chad Kelly, you're going to need this defense to step up, whether that be forcing more turnovers or just, really not getting gashed in some situations against a pass. But again, one of those things where we will see. And my final talking point here is about whether or not Toronto can stay on that perch as a top team in the East. They, of course, have won back-to-back regular season titles for the East and are in a situation where it's more up in the air. Now, I do feel like for myself, I expected them to be a team that wasn't going to win the division the past 2 years. I really feel like the past 2 years they've overperformed and some teams have underperformed, whether or not that's been the injuries or if it's been the schemes, whatever the case is. I have been hesitant to really hype up Toronto, even if they won that Grey Cup last year. I do feel like if you do that, 10 times, 100 times, Winnipeg, of course, would win, let's say 80, 85, 90, whatever the case is, against that Argos team. They just really had a good situation where they took advantage of some key moments here, but now they're in a spot where maybe their dominance in the East or their ability to take that top spot in the East is done for, and I do think that could be a little bit of a concern for them. A few years ago, you had Montreal and Hamilton kind of pushing for that, but Montreal was never a true contender for that top spot, I think, whereas Hamilton really should have been the favorite. Hamilton is again in that situation right now where they are a favorite to contend for the top spot. Ottawa, I know they are losing Jeremiah Masoli for the first 2 games of the season. That could be an issue, but I do think that if Masoli comes back and doesn't miss more games than that, they are in a position to be a better team, and they could be a 3-headed race there. Montreal, I've talked about in my season preview, I'm shying away from them. I don't think that they'll be in contention for that top spot in the division, but it will be interesting to see whether Ryan Dinwiddie can get another good year out of this club, where more people, I think, will expect him to be kind of like second or third in the division, whereas Dinwiddie's guys continue to take that top spot, and he's been a guy that's had a lot of success as a head coach in Toronto. So I don't know what we're going to see here, and I think that'll be fun to see this playoff race and just this divisional race, and whether or not Toronto can get that 3rd division title. So what are my final thoughts for Toronto? What do I think is going to be something that happens here, and what do I think their season will be like? Well, I do think that Chad Kelly is going to go out there, and he probably will be the starter. I think that's expected, and I think there could be some growing pains. I don't think that this team is going to fall off the face of a cliff. I would like to kind of point out the fact that last year, I feel like with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he was a guy that would have kind of rough games, and the team, the offense, would have kind of rough games in general too. And next thing you know, it's the 4th quarter, he throws a bomb, they end up scoring a touchdown, defense gets a turnover, they kick a field goal, they get a stop, and they kick a field goal. Now they've got a 10-point swing, they go on to win the game. They were not a team that was probably going to blow out other good teams, but they were a team that was able to take advantage of key moments. We're going to have to see what happens here with Kelly if he's able to fix that, because I do think that that's harder to achieve. You're not going to be in a situation where over and over and over again you're going to be in those close games where you get to have those breakaway moments, but we do know that this club has plenty of talent on both ends of the ball. Boris Beatty is going to be just booting 50-plus yard field goals to help his team out, and you do have some of that longevity there with Dinwiddie as the head coach. I don't exactly know if I will say that they'll grab the top spot in the division. I don't even know if I'm going to be comfortable enough saying that they'll make the playoffs. Right now, I feel like I'm leaning towards yes, especially with that Mazzoli injury. I do think that they should be second or third in the division. If you get the second spot, you're guaranteed a playoff spot. So whether or not Toronto is an 11-7 type team like last year, I don't really think that's going to be the case, but it's all going to be about whether or not they can get back in the playoffs, because you can make things happen there. Because of course we saw in the 2022 Grey Cup, they weren't supposed to win that one, but guess what? They did. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Toronto Argonauts this season? What kind of team do you think they will be? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe and have a great night.